"You have 24 hours to get out of the house," my daughter-in-law whispered into my ear as she leaned in to hug me at my own son's funeral. Her arms were warm, her smile soft for the cameras, but her words cut through me like cold steel. I stood there frozen, surrounded by mourners who thought we were grieving together, while inside I felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. I didn't cry, not then. I held it all in because I didn't want anyone to see me fall apart. I had just buried my only son, and now the woman he married, the one I had accepted into my home, was telling me I no longer had a place there. No warning, no kindness, just a whisper full of poison and power. I sat through the rest of the funeral in silence, my hands clenched in my lap. I could hear people saying how strong I looked, how proud my son must have been of me. They didn't know that my heart was being crushed in slow motion. My son, my boy, was gone. And before I could even finish grieving, I was being pushed out like trash. That night, I went back to the house, my house, feeling like a stranger. Elise, my daughter-in-law, didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I could feel it in the way she looked at me. Cold, done, ready to erase me. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the guest room where she had moved my things, thinking of every small moment, every time I ignored her rude comments, every time I tried to believe we were family. I thought about my son, how much he had changed in the last year, how tired he looked, how Elise always answered his phone when I called. It all started to click. I didn't know how yet, but I made myself a quiet promise that night. I wouldn't go down without knowing the full truth. I wouldn't leave without fighting for my name, my home, and the memory of my son. And if Elise thought she had already won, then she didn't know me at all. Not yet. Before the funeral, before the whisper that changed everything, things were already falling apart. But I didn't see it clearly back then. My son Daniel had always been kind, gentle, and full of life. When he married Elise, I tried my best to welcome her. She was quiet but polished, always saying the right thing around others. At first, I thought she was just shy. Now I know better. It started small. Elise began to decide who Daniel could see and who he couldn't. She said he was too busy for visits. Calls became shorter, then missed entirely. Whenever I dropped by, I noticed how tense Daniel looked, how carefully he chose his words. I'd try to ask if everything was all right, and Elise would always jump in with a soft laugh and say, "He's just tired." But his eyes said something else. One night, I overheard Elise mocking me on the phone to someone. She called me clingy, said I was a burden. I should have confronted her then, but I didn't. I kept quiet, thinking it would pass. But it only got worse. Daniel began to lose weight. He looked pale, weak. I thought it was work stress, but Elise said he was fine. She controlled everything. His food, his medicine, his schedule. I offered to help, but she refused. "He doesn't need anyone fussing over him," she told me sharply. The words stung. Then, one day, I got a call. Daniel had collapsed. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. Just like that. I stood at his bedside, holding his cold hand, feeling like I'd failed him. Elise cried for the crowd, but her eyes stayed dry when no one was looking. And something inside me snapped. I couldn't sleep after the funeral. I kept replaying everything, every warning sign, every silence. I remembered the pills Elise gave him, the strange food she insisted he eat, the way she stopped me from visiting. I started writing everything down. Dates, words, behaviors. I didn't have proof, but I had instincts. And a mother's instincts are rarely wrong. There were 2 funerals, the one for my son and the one for the truth. But I wasn't ready to bury both, not yet. A week after the funeral, I was called into a lawyer's office to hear the reading of Daniel's will. I didn't expect much, but I at least thought he'd leave me something. A letter, a small keepsake, a note to say goodbye. He was my only child. But as I sat there, listening in silence, my heart sank. Everything, his savings, the house, even his car, was left to Elise. There wasn't a single mention of me, not one. I sat frozen as Elise nodded politely, pretending to wipe away a tear. When the lawyer asked if I had any questions, I shook my head. My throat felt like it was closing. I walked out without saying a word, my ears ringing and my chest hollow. Later that night, I sat alone in my tiny room at the back of the house, the one Elise had moved me into. I thought about all the conversations Elise must have had with Daniel, how she must have twisted things, turned him against me. How had he changed his will without even telling me? And why would he cut me off so completely? None of it made sense. I reached out to an old friend, Ada, a retired lawyer who once helped me with a small land dispute years ago. She agreed to meet me quietly at a cafe. She listened patiently, taking notes as I spoke. Then she looked at me and said gently, "It's legal, but strange, very strange." Ada explained that Elise, as Daniel's wife, could have influenced him easily. If he was sick or under stress, it would have been simple to push changes through, especially if no one else was involved. But Ada also pointed out something odd. Daniel had updated the will only 2 months before his death, and Elise was listed as the executor. That gave her full control over everything, including hiding or adjusting certain documents. My stomach turned. "Do you think something's wrong?" I asked. "I think you should start collecting things," she said. Quietly, paperwork, emails, phone records, anything odd. That night I began to dig. Bills, receipts, medical forms. I found small signs that didn't sit right. Appointments Daniel never told me about, prescriptions I'd never heard of, payments made to names I didn't recognize. A small fire started in my chest. Grief was still there, but something else was rising now. Determination. I didn't know what Elise was hiding yet, but I was going to find out. I used to think love was unbreakable between a mother and her child, that no matter what happened, no one could come between that bond, but I was wrong. Elise didn't just marry my son. She erased me from his heart, piece by piece, until I became a stranger in his life. It didn't happen overnight. At first, Elise was polite, quiet, distant, but never rude. Then slowly, the distance grew. Daniel stopped calling as often. When I visited, he was always busy or tired. Elise would say things like, "He's stressed, Mum. He needs rest." And I believed her. I thought she was protecting him. I thought she cared. Then came the lies. A neighbour mentioned a family dinner at Daniel's house that I was never invited to. When I asked Daniel about it, he looked confused and said, "Elise said you were travelling." I wasn't. I never was. Another time, I overheard her telling someone that I used to beat Daniel when he was a child. I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling like the ground had been pulled from under me. I never laid a finger on my son. Never. The worst part was that Daniel believed her. He began pulling away from me completely. He once said, "Mum, I don't want drama in my life." I asked what he meant, and he said Elise told him I'd been spreading rumours about her, that I called her names, that I accused her of poisoning him. I was speechless. None of it was true. I started writing everything down, every strange moment, every word. I didn't know why then. I just wanted to hold on to something, to prove I wasn't crazy. After Daniel's death, I went through his old laptop, which Elise had carelessly tossed into a donation box. It was password protected, but I remembered his birthday. Once I got in, my hands trembled. There were saved texts and old emails, messages Elise sent him from fake accounts pretending to be me, calling her names, threatening her, fabricated conversations. She had gaslighted him for years. She even made a fake email using my name to send Daniel cruel messages, and he had believed every word. I found one heartbreaking reply from him. "Mum, why would you say these things? I just want peace." I sat with that message in my hands and cried, not just for what I'd lost, but for what had been stolen. Elise didn't just take my son's love. She poisoned it, rewrote it, and used it to turn him against me. But now, I had proof, and I wasn't staying silent anymore. I never imagined my name would be tied to something so cruel. I had lived a simple life, raised my son with love, and stayed out of trouble. But Elise told everyone that I had once tried to poison her. It sounded too wild to believe, but somehow, people did. Even Daniel. I found out about it by accident. A neighbour, while comforting me after Daniel's funeral, mentioned it. "I'm glad things calmed down between you and Elise after that poisoning issue," she said gently. I blinked. "What poisoning issue?" She looked at me, confused. "You know, the one where you put something in her tea." I stood there, cold and stunned. Later that night, I searched through Daniel's laptop again. I found a long message he had written to Elise a year ago. He had said, "I don't believe my mother would do something like that. I just wish we had more proof." Elise's reply was chilling. "She won't confess. She's too good at hiding things. But I know what I tasted. I'm lucky to be alive." I remembered that day clearly now. Elise had visited with Daniel. I made tea for everyone. Nothing happened. No one got sick. But the next morning, Daniel called, saying Elise had stomach cramps. I offered to help, but he hung up. From that moment on, things changed between us. Now, seeing the old texts, I knew it was all part of her plan. I searched deeper, and found a voice memo Elise had recorded. She had been practicing what she would say. She tried to poison me. I was afraid for my life. Her voice sounded calm, too calm. She had rehearsed the lie. I sat back, heart pounding. Elise hadn't just lied. She had built an entire story to make me look dangerous. And Daniel, confused and torn, slowly pulled away from me. She didn't have to scream or fight. She used quiet words and fear to build a wall between me and my son. Now I knew. I began printing the messages and saving voice memos. I stored everything in a red folder and locked it away. I also started meeting people Elise had lied to one by one, asking careful questions and letting them talk. Slowly, the truth began to form, piece by piece. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't yelling. I was waiting, because when the time came, I would show the world the lie she told and everything she had done to destroy us. Elise thought I was old, tired, and broken. She believed grief had made me slow, but she made one mistake, her first real mistake, and it changed everything. After Daniel's funeral, I moved into the small cottage behind the main house. Elise let me stay there for a few weeks while she sorted things out. She was cold, but polite in front of others. When no one was looking, her eyes burned with quiet cruelty. One day, I was in the main house, picking up a box of Daniel's things Elise said I could take. That's when I saw it, a phone bill tossed carelessly on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me look. Maybe it was instinct, maybe something deeper. I scanned the numbers out of habit. Then one caught my eye. It was called repeatedly, same number, same time, over several days. I searched it online. It belonged to a toxicology specialist, not a regular doctor, not a family clinic, a man who specialized in poisons. My stomach turned cold. I copied the number and left quietly. That night, I dialed it. A man answered. I pretended to be Elise's assistant, saying she had asked me to follow up about the conversation they had weeks ago. He didn't hesitate. Ah, yes, she was asking about untraceable compounds. Natural one, the kind that don't show up in normal blood tests. I assumed it was for a book project or a crime novel. She was very specific though. I recorded the entire call. I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. Elise had been looking for ways to hurt Daniel without leaving a trace. And now I had a voice recording, proof that she was planning something long before Daniel fell sick. I didn't go to the police yet. I knew I needed more. I began keeping everything, copies, dates, names. Elise still thought she had won. She would smile at me in the morning, cold and confident, thinking I was too broken to fight back. But I had her first real mistake in my hands now, and I wasn't going to waste it. I acted like I didn't know what was going on. I nodded when Elise told me I should rest more. I smiled when she called me forgetful. I even thanked her for the leftovers she sent to the cottage behind the main house. Food she only gave me after everyone else had eaten. She thought I was fading, that I'd given up, but I wasn't going anywhere. I was watching, listening, waiting. From the outside, I looked like an old woman too broken by grief to fight. I wore old cardigans, walked slower, spoke less. People pitied me. Elise used that pity to her advantage. She's not doing well, she'd whisper to guests who came over. I'm just trying to give her peace in her last years. I played the part. I pretended to forget things. I stared off during conversations. But behind my tired eyes, I was remembering everything. I set up 4 cameras inside the house. Elise didn't know. 1 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 near her office, and 1 in the hallway. I had help from a young man who came under the excuse of fixing the plumbing. He didn't ask questions. I paid him in cash. From my small cottage, I watched everything through a laptop Marianne's grandson helped me set up. I recorded hours of video. I took screenshots. I kept notes. Elise was careless. She made calls without checking who was around. She spoke to someone named Anthony often, a man who never came through the front door. She talked about transfers, lawyers, selling assets quickly. She never mentioned my son's name, not even once. It was like he never existed. I saved it all, but I knew that footage alone wasn't enough. So I started feeding small bits of the truth to a journalist. Her name was Kemi, young, smart, persistent. I didn't tell her who I was. I sent anonymous messages. Look into the death of Daniel Thomas, one message said. Talk to the people from his foundation. Check the will. I sent copies of email, redacted phone records, bits of Elise's conversations. Kemi started asking questions online. I saw her posts. One tweet said, "Sometimes widows cry for attention. Sometimes they cry for what they stole. Elise didn't know any of this. She thought I was broken, but I was more focused than ever. I played nice. I kept quiet. And every time she smiled at me, I smiled back, knowing she had no idea her time was running out. I thought I knew the worst of Elise, but the truth ran deeper and darker. It started when I followed a name I heard her mention during a phone call, a name she said with a hint of carelessness, as if no one would notice. Janice, she'd said. Janice still thinks I'm in Milan. I wrote it down. With the help of Kimi, the journalist I'd been feeding small tips to, we dug into Elise's past, except we couldn't find any solid trace of her under the name Elise Thomas before her marriage to my son. That's when the pieces started to fall into place. Elise wasn't her real name. She had used at least 3 different aliases over the past 15 years. And each time, she married a wealthy older man, moved into his life, and within 2 years, he was dead. In one case, the man's family had raised questions, but the investigation went nowhere. His death was ruled natural. The will, of course, left everything to his new wife, the same woman who now stood in my kitchen sipping tea, as though she hadn't stolen everything I loved. Eventually, I tracked down someone who had tried to fight her, Janice. She was the sister of one of Elise's former husbands. I reached out carefully, cautiously, not sure if she'd answer, but she did. And when we met, her face turned pale as soon as I said Elise's name. She did the same thing to my brother, Janice said. I tried to tell people, but she's smart. She covers her tracks. We sat together for hours, going over timelines, names, documents. Janice had saved letters, emails, even an old voicemail from her brother before he died. Together, we began piecing the puzzle. Elise had perfected her game over the years. She changed her look, her accent, her backstory. She targeted men who were lonely, grieving, or just eager to be loved. But now, she'd made her biggest mistake. She underestimated 2 women who had nothing left to lose. Janice agreed to go on record. Kemi was ready. And I, for the first time in a long while, felt something stronger than grief. I felt purpose. We were ready to tell the world who Elise really was. Elise had given me 24 hours to leave my own home, but I had taken much longer, and I used every second of it to gather the truth. By now, I had recordings of her suspicious phone calls, proof of her past aliases, testimonies from Janice and others, and even video footage of her mocking my supposed weakness. Every detail was documented, carefully organized into files and USB drives. I packed everything into 3 manila envelopes, one for my lawyer, one for the police, and one for the press. I didn't call or threaten her. I let her feel safe, let her enjoy her false victory. She'd even sent me a smug message the night before the charity gala. Hope you're adjusting to your new cottage. I'll be thinking of you tonight when we toast Richard's memory. I smiled when I read it. Toast him, I thought. This is the last time you'll wear his name in public. The gala was a grand event. Elise wore red, bold, flashy, and confident. Cameras flashed around her as she smiled for reporters. She gave a speech about my late son, calling him a guiding light and a man who taught her how to love. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't pound. I had planned every second of this. As the crowd applauded, the large screen behind her flickered. At first, just a few murmurs. Then the first photo came up. Elise with her former husband under one of her old names. Then another photo. Elise at another funeral. Her voice faltered. The video began to play. A recording of her call with the toxicologist. A voice message she left bragging to a friend. A tearful Janice recounting her own brother's fate. People in the audience froze. A few reporters immediately began filming. Elise turned pale, her eyes darting as if searching for a way out. Kemi, the journalist, stepped forward. Elise Thomas, or should I say, Anna Whitmore, care to explain these recordings? Security guards moved in, not to protect her, but to escort her away. The humiliation was public. Legal action was already underway behind the scenes. But this moment, this unraveling in front of the very people she tried to impress, was the justice I wanted her to feel. She had given me 24 hours to leave. I gave her just one night to lose everything. I sit in the living room now, the same one Elise told me to leave. The walls are quiet again. No whispers of poison or lies, just silence and peace. The house is mine, legally and rightfully. After Elise's arrest, the courts moved quickly. The will was contested and proven to be manipulated. Her long list of crimes, aliases, and victims made headlines for weeks. People reached out, some to apologize, others to thank me for speaking up. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wanted justice, and I got it. I could have sold the house, left the memories behind, but I chose to stay, not because of the furniture or the bricks, but because my son built this life with his own hands. His photographs are back on the shelves. His favorite coffee mug is in the kitchen, untouched. I'm not here to mourn anymore. I'm here to remember him, properly. I took the settlement money and started a small foundation in his name. It helps elderly people who have been manipulated, abandoned, or forced out by those who should love them. Every story I hear reminds me I'm not alone. I never wanted revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted peace. And in the end, I found both. Not in fire or anger, but in quiet, steady steps. Elise will live the rest of her life behind bars, where her lies can't follow her. And me, I will sit here, sip tea in this old house, and finally rest. Not with joy, not with grief, just with the cold, still silence of everything finally falling into place. Do you think Elise truly believed she would get away with it all? Or was she just too confident in her lie? I'd love to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories of justice, betrayal, and quiet revenge, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.